heard the expression, he has the soul of a poet. Have you ever wondered how a poet thinks or what inspires poetry? I've got an author I'd like you to meet whose poems will invite you to walk side by side with the poet as he develops his poet's soul. Learn what inspired each piece and feel what he was feeling. Stick around because we're going to learn more about his book and the writing process he followed to create it.
Welcome to A Book Finds You podcast. This week's guest is Les Deck. Join us as he shares the inspiration behind his book, along with his writing process, routines, and challenges. And now here's your host, best-selling author, Rob Jolles.
Today's guest, Les Deck, is a leadership team coach and trainer. His current work follows a long career in business management, including starting, growing, and selling his own companies. He's been writing free verse for many years and often uses it in his work. Les's first book is He Is Working Late, Thoughts and Prayers by Les Deck. Happy to have you with us and welcome to the show, Les.
Thank you, Rob. Nice to be here.
Pleasure to have you here. And you know the show's called A Book Finds You, so I'm guessing you might have been working late, but how did this book find you, Les?
Well, this book found me because since I've been using poetry in my work and particularly in training sessions, a number of people over the years have said, well, when's that book coming out? And finally,
Welcome to A Book
I
Finds
took
You
it as an
podcast.
objective
This week's guest
2 years
is Les Deck.
to put
Join
this
us
thing together
as he shares the
and
inspiration
actually
behind
publish
his
it.
book,
First, I thought it was
along
an
with his
anthology
writing
of poetry,
process,
just
routines,
lists of
and
poems.
challenges. And now here's
then
your
I found
host,
it
best-selling
necessary
author,
to
Rob Jolles.
explain why I had written them and what inspired me about it. And so it is a collection of nearly 40 poems with a connective tissue of where I was, what I was thinking about, and what inspired me to write them.
Yeah.
And it found me in that way. And it became more than just, a collection. I was kind of writing for my family and my friends to something that, I feel close to, a book that I feel close to, and people who read it come back and say, I know you much better now.
I think, Les, actually, I think that's one of the nicest compliments an author can get is when somebody comes up and says something like, I know you much better, or I felt like you were kind of sitting there next to me. To me, that says you have a very authentic approach to your writing. And I know I had let's not name names. I know somebody who I know well, who is a tremendous communicator, but when he wrote like somebody else. And there are people out there called authentic voice editors, things like that, that the publishers will hire to try and get that voice back. But already you got one of the greatest compliments you can get, which is, that was you I was reading.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And this is your first book, Les?
It is, but it's a collection, Rob. It's a collection of things that have been written over 30 years. And so I just feel like it's just now been swept together and got some connective tissue and put in a binder, and here it is. There could be another one. I'm not sure. Since I write from inspiration for a situation, I don't know how much of that is going to come.
Right. Do you have the energy to market that book? I mean, are you fighting for it out there?
I can't say that I'm fighting a lot. I'm a pretty busy guy. I've got a lot going on, and whether it'll become an economically viable thing to have done is not quite clear at this point. But that isn't the issue. The issue is take what I've done and get it out there, just see what reaction there is to it. If there's more for me to do in writing, it will become obvious.
Right. Well, and that's why the show's called A Book Finds You, because that's pretty much what you're describing. If it's there, it'll find me.
Right. Well,
and if not,
Rob, late in September, I had occasion to go out through the Midwest, where I was born and raised in southeastern Iowa. I was there at the harvest time, and I saw what was going on in the fields now, which is 50 years, 60 years since I left there. But I see the difference between what was possible in terms of family lifestyle 60 years ago and what is portended in reality by the way farming is done now, there's something there that I want to write about, and I've started writing about that. So unfortunately, it's a kind of book that requires a bunch of research, and I don't have a lot of time for research. So it's likely to become a poem where I can use opinion and a statement rather than spend a lot of time researching.
Yeah. Although I will tell you this, I wrote my first book in 93 and I did a lot of research on it and it wasn't easy. Now, when I do research with this thing called an internet and a Google search, I mean, less, I don't want to get into, you remember in the days, but do you remember in the days when research meant getting an Encyclopedia Britannica practically, or,
Yeah,
heading to the research center or something? There's a lot more at our fingertips now.
yeah, yeah. No kidding. I use AI frequently in my work now because where I used to labor through putting together a presentation or creating a piece of curriculum, now it's just much easier. And today with ChatGPT, you can take what they send you, but you can also ask for the source material for that so that it just isn't a bunch of gobbledygook. Then you can check out the source material and make sure it's okay. So, yes, it is a great deal easier. It's still kind of laborious.
Right. No, I'm Chat GBT kind of scares me a little bit because it can be that good. So people have heard me talk about this, but I like it for creative naming, chapters, titles, books, things like that, just to basically say, here, look this over and give me 15 titles that are creative and bring out they come. So I like that as a nice creative push. I get a little bit nervous just that I'm going to, almost like an athlete, that I'm going to atrophy a bit if I count on it too much. But certainly for research, oof, it's there to help us. One more quick thing. You mentioned that you had some people telling you, Les, you got to do this, Les, you got to write a book on this. Why were they pushing you? Were you talking about it at that time, or how did they know?
Well, they like the poems,
Okay.
and usually they fit where I used them,
Okay.
and they portrayed a thought pattern about the subject matter. And I think people said, this guy is, I don't know, has gathered a little wisdom someplace. And maybe if he likes to share it in this creative way, it'd be a good idea to, put it out there.
Yeah, Les, you got to get more excited about yourself there. That's a compliment when people do that. And I'll tell you what I was fishing for there. I wish that more people who thought about writing would not only listen to their friends and realize they're helping them out, but by golly, wear a pin that says I'm working on a book. And I know that when people hear that, they go, oh my goodness, if I do that, then I'm probably going to really have to write it. I mean, I'm going to be accountable. My friends are going to keep asking. And I give them a big smile and say, well, I thought 5 minutes ago you told me you wanted to write a book.
Yeah.
One of the best ways to do it is don't be so quiet about it. Don't keep it a secret. Let people know. And yes, they're going to nudge you a bit, but you needed a nudge. I need a nudge. A nudge is a good thing. That's what friends are for, right?
Well, in terms of accountability, which is one of my favorite words and what I use when I'm working with executives and business groups constantly, um,
Right.
one of the best ways to be accountable is to tell people you're going to do it.
Right.
And I'm not afraid of accountability. I live with it and hold people to it, things that they say they'll do constantly. And so I took it to heart. And I appreciate people who say, why don't you do something? Uh,
Good.
we can decide to or not to, but it's nice that they look at it and say, I'd like to see more of that.
Right. In your book, you talk about Vistage. Are you still a Vistage chair?
No, I'm not. For the last 3 years since I moved to North Carolina, my groups were in Florida, southeastern Florida, and I spun those off. I'm in chair emeritus. I go down to their annual meetings, and the president of Vistage Florida is a good friend of mine. And so I'm still close to it. I have access to the website. I can go to the meetings if I want to, but no, I don't lead groups anymore.
Good. And we'll leave Vistage, but just in 20 seconds or less, give people who are listening right now kind of a general idea of what Vistage is.
Vistage is a peer group for owners and CEOs of companies of all sizes, actually, but the sweet spot is from maybe 20 million up to half a billion. Beyond a half a billion, they can go hire any number of consultants that they want to train them individually. But we put them together in groups of about 20 people, none of them competitive with each other, and they become each other's board. And my way of explaining that was it's the best board you can't hire.
Right.
Because they wouldn't work for you, but they will give you advice if you give them advice. There are formulaic ways to lay those meetings out and to get their input, but it's the best thing since business was devised for those people, because they have people who have only their goodwill and best wishes for each other to work with, and lots of knowledge, of course. So they bring a lot of good advice, and generally speaking, the businesses run better. But the big deal is the CEOs become better leaders and, in fact, better people.
Right. Right. I'm familiar with it. I'm actually, I don't do it a lot, but I'm a Vistage speaker. So also what Les would be telling you is not only do they get together, but they have access to some pretty good speakers. You got to go through that catalog. There's a lot of them, but there's some diamonds in the rough in there. And so, but in any case, so I'm familiar with it. And I was smiling when I saw you wear Vistage chair. All right, let's jump back into your writing, sir. How do you come up with, I know how I come up with my business ideas, and sometimes a fictional writer will how they'll come up with a story. You're coming up with poems. How do you come up with the ideas for the poems?
Well, some of the poems are about business situations, and many of them are not. There's a poem in there called "Waiting for Sunrise," which is pure inspiration, and it's a good example of how poems come to me. You say a book finds you. Actually, poems find me,
Yeah.
where I am. And if I'm not inspired, if the sunrise hadn't spoken to me hanging on the southeast slope of a flat top mountain in North Carolina, if I hadn't seen those vapors of the sunrise coming past me, if I hadn't seen the horizon fall back from the rising of that orange disc as it came out of the distance, then I wouldn't have been inspired. And when I'm inspired, I can sit down and the poem comes almost whole. There'll be a few words, maybe a phrase to manipulate a little bit, but it comes almost whole as it is. And it comes out of the situation. And it is very emotional, very emotional. And a poem like Sunrise, I can't read without breaking up. For some, I can now, of course. It's been a few years since I wrote it. But if I write the poem, I go in to show it to my wife, who's, it says in my book, is my first editor, always. I will try to read it to her. And before I'm done, she'll be over with her arm around my shoulders. Because I'm so into the words, I can't read them without emotion.
We all want to have passion for what we write. You're certainly displaying it there. When that sun comes up, when those streaks go by, do you begin with the end in mind, or do you just sort of let nature take its course?
Nature, if I'm inspired enough, Rob, to sit down and write, then nature's already taken its course. I'm
Okay.
just a vehicle at that point, and I'm writing it out and changing a couple of words.
Okay. And how about a routine? Do you have a daily writing routine? If so, what does that look like?
I do not. I've made a goal this year in 2025 to write something, whether it's connective tissue or whether it is actually a creative piece, every week. And so to do that in my style, I have to be inspired. Otherwise, the routine of sitting down on Friday morning with the blank page is not something that I can relate to. I do it, and I used to have to do it because I committed myself to writing a poem for every Vistage meeting for a while, and so I would try to do that. But if I'm not inspired, it just doesn't work for me.
How about a blog? Do you write a blog?
I've written many blogs. I'm not writing one right now, but you'll find them on my website if you want to go look.
Well, let's promote that website. What's that website?
It's lessdeck.com.
All right. All right. More energy. More energy. That's LESDECK.
Yeah, that would be it.
Okay.
Just
All
like
right.
the deck of a ship or that thing outside your patio door.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, I write something called a blarticle, and I actually trademarked it, just not because I didn't want people to use it, but because in the business world, you come up with a good idea and you don't protect it, somebody else takes it. So I just wanted to make sure I didn't have to build a brand and have it taken from me. But I wanted sort of a blog article, and that's what I was looking for. But Les, I'll tell you, as a writer who, sometimes I'm very much in between books. That's my, let's say a book is the Super Bowl, but a blog to me is almost like a training experience. It just keeps me in shape. I actually wrote the legal definition of articles. It has to be under 750 words, so I can't go more than 750. I used to do them every week, but to your point, I wasn't inspired every week. And I didn't want to just put something down because, by golly, it's Friday. Uh, but I did think, you know what? Every other week, I have a responsibility to do the best I can on 750 or less. Sometimes they're more inspired than others, but I'm pushing you as a thought back to a blog just to think about it because, like a boxer, I'm telling you, you're just hitting the heavy bag. You're just hitting the speed
Yeah.
bag a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And I did it for a while on my website because the idea, and published on LinkedIn as well, but the idea was to provide content. People
Mhm.
think that you're going to get more attention if you have content. So
Right.
I tried to provide content, and then what happened, excuse me, what happened is that I was more interested in the creativity than I was the content, actually, the business content. And so I wrote one called the Something Tale of Bill Strong. And I made up the name, and I made up a house that he lived in and an address for it in the Chicago area, Chicago suburban area. I know that area very well. I made up a plant that he owned and some problems that he had in the plant. I wrote a couple of units about it and put it together. There were about 750 words each. And I got a note from a guy in the Chicago area that says, I think I know that guy.
See, you never know who you're communicating with. And one last thing I'll let go. And for you writers, one of the reasons why I maintain this article 16 years now, and I'm sort of pushing writers into a blog. Les, you're kind of a tweener because you're working on poetry, and I don't know if that's a little bit different than me just getting a thought out there. A poem is a much more manicured uh, document to me, or a piece of information. But when I'm working on a book and I've outlined that book, a lot of times I'm actually taking little pieces of it and saying, you know what? I need to figure out how to say that well. I'm going to spend 2 weeks on those 750 words, and then I'm going to place it where it belongs. So it lets me just sort of hunker down. Anyway, I don't want to sell you on it. I want people to understand that blogs don't necessarily get in the way of a writer. They keep us in shape, and you can double dip a little bit sometimes on them.
I
So
get it. And I
just a
believe
thought.
you're correct.
Yeah. All right, let's keep rolling. You have you ever abandoned a poem before?
Oh, tons of them. Yeah. When I try to write them
Hmm.
dry, when
Right.
I'm not wet and dripping with inspiration of some kind, I often just put them aside.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of them on my hard disk that, they just sort of trail off to nothing. And I might go back to them sometime, but probably not.
How do you know when and that's scary to me a little bit. How do you know when this thing has to be put aside and you shouldn't spend a little bit more time grinding?
Could be, Rob, because I'm not a grinder. Could be.
Hmm.
When I'm writing poetry, good turns of phrases come up.
Right.
When I'm grinding, those things don't come up. And when I say come up, I mean it quite literally. They come up from your gut or your heart someplace and through your brain and, out into your fingertips if you're typing or writing by hand, or out of your mouth if you're speaking. And if those good turns of phrases don't come, then it's not going to be of value.
Hmm. Okay. And again, I think that's the difference. I'm not looking for a poem. So I'll stay in there. And the term grinding is kind of interesting. I think of it, I'm a terrible golfer, but I think of it a little bit like the way a golfer uses the word grinding, meaning they'll play a round of golf and no shot really comes that easy. It's not that enjoyable of a round, yet they'll score pretty well. I mean, it really won't be reflected in the score. So mentally, I think of grinding as it won't be reflected in my product, my finished product. It's just going to be harder to get there. And sometimes we all know chapters and pieces, they practically write themselves. They're very quick. But that's me grinding and that's a tough part for writers to know when should I put it aside? When should I keep fighting? And I think I don't know if there's an answer less, it's 6.2 minutes. I mean, I don't think there's a number. I think it depends on our personality and maybe the type of writing we're doing.
So I had a little bit of that experience, I
Hmm.
think, Rob, when I was putting what I refer to as the connective tissue together. That in this book, there's a little bit about biography. It's not an autobiography, but there's a little bit about where I was, geography, and it's not a geographic presentation. But there, you put those two together with what I was feeling, and that takes some connective writing. I was here, I was doing this, therefore I was thinking about this, and this is the poem that came. And so that was all written after the fact. It all had occurred at that point. And the creative process that you're describing is a little more analogous to putting that together than writing poetry, I think. Now I say that, and I don't know how David White does it. I don't know how Robert Frost did it. I don't know how Maya Angelou came up with what she did, or Whitman, or Derek Walcott, or anybody. And these are all free verse writers that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We don't have to have the discipline of making sure that the iambic pentameter and everything rhymes.
Right.
You have to make a rhythm.
Yeah.
When I wrote the poem Engines I've Known, I'm a car freak, and I wanted the syntax to have the feel of that particular engine, the sound of that particular engine as I was writing it. So, I use little tricks like that. But
Do you have that poem handy?
sure. All right. So it's called Engines I Have Known. I love the internal combustion engine. It has a sound and fury that excites me. The whine of an IndyCar engine reaching 12,000 RPM as the driver downshifts rapidly, slowing the car for a 90-degree corner. The mid-range thrum of a NASCAR V8, still normally aspirated and easily reaching 9,500 RPM. Remembering the ground-pounding roar of the massive unlimited Chevrolet V8s powering original Can-Am cars in the early 70s. My Alfa Romeo 164Q 3-liter 4-cam 24-valve V6 engine at high speed and full song late on a cold winter night on Interstate 88. The unique sound of the 2.5-liter Boxer 4 that made my Subaru Impreza a fun ride from 2002 to 2011. Today, most internal combustion motors are quieted by multiple mufflers. Auto vehicle weights are matched to optimal engines with fuel injection turbochargers and 7-speed automatic or CV transmissions. Even the lowly family sedan is a performance vehicle if you measure by gas mileage. Only the computer-equipped tuner with a selection of chips can enhance performance. Removing restrictive catalytic converters from exhaust systems is strictly illegal. Header-equipped engines with low back pressure mufflers or straight pipes are fading into the past. All too soon, cars will be electric and perhaps owned by companies who send them driverless to take you where you need to go, ordered via apps. No romance. Until then, I will happily drive near the speed limit, but I always get to that speed as rapidly and noisily as possible, I will always miss the back wrap of my 283 Chevy with glass pack dual exhaust, or the roar of my bored out 340 Mopar with 3/4 cam and headers, pleasures of the past.
Outstanding. I'm listening to it, kind of closing my eyes. I can almost hear the Beach Boys tack it up. Little Honda. I think those would accompany it very well. If you ever do there's what's called an enhanced ebook. I think this technology is still out there. You can put video in. I
Yeah.
could see almost a nice video accompanying that one. That would be cool. Very good. All right, I got a good taste of your writing now. But look, we're coming down the home stretch now. If you were talking to an aspiring writer, give me one or two pieces of advice you would give it, and let's stay in your lane. An aspiring poet, somebody who wants to write a book on poems.
Well, it's the first thing would be go to your feelings, get in touch with your feelings. Don't be afraid to be sensitive and write what affects you.
Write for affection?
Yeah, that too. Write what affects you,
What affects you? Got it.
impacts you,
Okay.
what speaks to you, and experiment with it. If it works, share it with people.
Yeah.
Get reaction.
Yeah, which, by the way, thanks for saying that because, again, I think some of us, we get a little bit shy. We don't want to tell people we're writing a book. We don't want to necessarily share it. That's why you're doing it, and let people react. I don't know if everyone's going to love every poem or everyone's going to love every chapter of mine, but at the end of the day, that's our piece of art. We're putting it out there. My wife is an artist. Not everybody who walks by her piece of art loves it. They're nutty, but because they should, but that's why we perform. That's why we write. So let's not be afraid of that. I think it's interesting. And for people you can't see a podcast, but when I asked Les to read that poem, there was zero hesitation. And actually, you got almost like a little smile on your face, like a little boy smile. I'm not talking down to you, but kind of you just sort of went into that part of your personality for a moment. Now you're back to less on a podcast personality, but
Well,
I certainly saw the writer and the car enthusiast kind of come out in that piece. Well done,
well,
really.
thank you, thank you. I had hoped you would ask me to read a poem, and I
Well,
didn't. Wasn't thinking of that one particularly, but um, it was. I enjoy reading it. It was good.
I'll tell you what, we're going to close the podcast off, but let's close it off with one more poem, okay? Reach in and get me a good one. Make it a little, not too long, okay? And we'll kind of close with that poem. So the floor is yours. Which one do you want?
I will choose. He is working late.
Oh,
The,
that's the title
the
of the book.
title of the
Okay.
book. Yeah. He is working late, working in his last 10 years. He is tempered by time and will deliver on promises, careful not to overpromise. He is unafraid of failure, not overly impressed with success. He's had his share of both. Offer him enthusiasm and hope, and he will observe you and celebrate with you. Offer him indifference and doubt, and he will challenge you and struggle with you. Without much effort, he will admit his shortcomings and acknowledge his strengths. He will appreciate both, not likely to be very reactive to either scorn or praise. Don't expect to move him with either. Understand that he will know what is true, and following that, will know what is not true, and has heard much of both. Decades of watching has tempered his interest in dire warnings and glowing promises. He is fearless enough to ask any question. He is likely to probe more deeply if he perceives you fear in you, but will not judge you. You cannot surprise him, embarrass him, or make him regret, so honesty will do. He appreciates you for what you are. Does that surprise you, scare you, disappoint you, encourage you? Do you see yourself in his eyes? Do you hear your voice in his words? Do you feel pain in his smile? He'll finish his work, but it will be a while. Not wanting to give up, he learns to keep up with you and adapts to technology. If he spends time with you, you are a verse of his poem and a chapter of his long story.
Ooh. See, that's why I asked that question to begin with the end in mind. I love the way that poem comes in for a landing. Really well done. Beautiful. Les, been a pleasure. The book is He is Working Late. Thoughts and Poems by Les Deck, and you just heard that one. How do people get a hold of you?
Well, they easily get in touch with me at lesdeck.com. There's a place to
Okay.
leave messages there. You can call me if you want. People do once in a while.
Okay.
That's 630-697-0739. I don't answer the phone, but if you leave a message, I'll probably return it.
You got a message machine on there, do you?
No, it's an iPhone and it has its own
Oh,
message.
it's like what I was going to say. There's still one of those around. Okay.
I threw that out along with the fax.
Good, good. Well, I used to sell them for Xerox, so I was back in the day. Really loved those plain paper fax machines Xerox was selling. Les, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show. Really enjoyed the poems, and I'm glad we got to hear a couple of them as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rob. Nice to be with you.
Nice to be with you. Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's guest author, we'd love you to rate, review, and share this episode with others. If you'd like more information on today's guest or the Maryland Writers Association, please visit our website at marylandwriters.org. You can also find out about the history of the Maryland Writers Association by listening to our first podcast, Episode 0.